My mother told 4 women at my wedding that I had been the difficult one. I know this because my maid of honor, Rosario, heard it and came to find me in the garden 30 minutes before the ceremony and told me what she had heard. My mother had been talking to the women who were doing her makeup. 2 of them were professionals I had hired, 2 were my aunts, and she had said, in the specific tone she uses when she is being confessional and warm, that raising me had been the challenge of her life in a way that raising my sister had never been. She had said specific things. She had named specific incidents. She had said that I had always needed too much. She had said that she had never quite understood me. She had said that she was proud of me, at the end, the way you are proud of something you have worked very hard for and that has finally turned out. I had done her hair that morning. I had been the one to do her hair, specifically because she trusted me with her hair in a way she did not trust the professionals. I had sat with her for an hour the morning of my wedding, doing her hair with the care and attention I had been giving to her since I was a teenager because that was what I had always done. She had then gone to the makeup room and told 4 women that I had been the difficult one. Rosario found me in the garden and told me in the specific, careful way of someone who has calculated the necessary information against the cost of delivering it and has decided the information is necessary. She had said, "There is something I need to tell you." She had said, "I want you to know because I think you should know, not because I think you should do anything about it right now." She had told me what she had heard. I had been in my wedding dress. The ceremony had been in 30 minutes. I had stood in the garden for a moment. Then I had said, "Okay." Rosario had said, "Okay." I had said, "I heard it. It is in me. I cannot do anything with it in 30 minutes. I am going to get married." She had looked at me for a moment. She had said, "You are the most composed person I have ever known." I had said, "I have had a lot of practice." I had not meant to say that. I had said it anyway because it was true. I had gotten married. After the ceremony, at the reception, my mother gave a toast. The toast was warm and funny and specific and included genuine memories of my childhood, told with the specific affection of a parent who loves their child clearly. The toast was everything a mother's toast at a wedding should be. The women from the makeup room were at the reception. They had heard the toast. They had also heard what she had said to them 3 hours earlier. I do not know what they made of the gap between the two. I know what I made of it. I made it into the subject of every important conversation I had in the 2 years that followed. I want to say something about what my mother's statement had contained, and about what it had revealed, and about why Rosario had been right that I needed to know it rather than not know it. My mother had said, "I always needed too much." This is a statement I had heard from her before, not at my wedding, not in front of witnesses, but in the private register of mother-daughter conflict that had been the texture of our relationship since I was approximately 12 years old. She had said, across the years, many versions of, "You are a lot. You want too much. You feel too much. You make everything harder than it needs to be." She had said these things not with cruelty, but with the specific quality of a parent who genuinely cannot understand why her child is the way her child is, and who has named the incomprehension as a characteristic of the child rather than as a limitation of her own understanding. The naming had been the injury, not the difficulty, but the designation. Being designated as the difficult one is a statement about who you are rather than about what is happening between you. I had been carrying the designation for as long as I could remember without having understood that the carrying of it was a choice, and that the designation itself was not a fact but an interpretation made by a person with limited understanding of who I was. The garden in 30 minutes before the ceremony had been the moment when I had understood this clearly. The clarity had arrived at the worst possible time, and had also arrived at exactly the right time. I am an architect. I have been doing this work for 8 years at a firm in Seattle that focuses on residential design, the specific practice of working with people to understand what kind of life they want to live and designing the space that makes that life possible. The work requires a specific kind of listening that I have been trained to do and that I had also been doing, without formal training, for my entire childhood. The listening that hears not only what someone says they want but what the saying reveals about what they actually need, and the subsequent work of designing toward the actual need rather than the stated want. A client will say, "I want a house that is open and bright." What they mean, unpacked over several conversations, might be, "I want a house that doesn't make me feel trapped the way my childhood home made me feel trapped." The stated want and the actual need are related but not identical. The design has to serve the actual need. I had been listening for the actual need behind the stated want for my entire life. The person I had been listening to most carefully was my mother. What she had said about me to the makeup room had been a stated want. She had been wanting to be understood, to be seen as a parent who had worked hard, to be given credit for the difficulty. What it had revealed was the actual need. She had needed the difficulty to be named as the difficulty so that her effort would be legible. The difficulty had been named. The difficulty had been me. I want to say something about the 2 years between the wedding and the conversation I finally had with my mother, and about what those 2 years had contained, and about why I had waited 2 years. The first year had been the year of marriage, the specific work of building a life with someone, which in the first year involves the kind of sustained mutual learning that does not have much room for old grievances to be processed into new understandings. My husband Jonas had known what Rosario had told me. I had told in the morning after the wedding, over breakfast, because I had held it through the ceremony and the reception and the drive to the hotel, and I had needed to release it to someone who could hold it. He had held it. He had not said, "Call your mother immediately." He had not said, "Let it go." He had said, "What do you need right now?" I had said, "I need to understand it. I need to understand why she said that, and what she was trying to do, and why the makeup room." I had said, "I need time." He had said, "Take it." The first year I had taken time. I had been paying attention to the pattern, not only the wedding incident but the full history of my mother's specific way of relating to me through a frame of my difficulty. The second year I had begun to prepare the conversation. By the December of the second year I had understood what I needed to say and what I needed to know and what the conversation was for. Before I go on, if something in this story is landing close to something real in your life, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely feel it. Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. My name is Selene. I am 34 years old. I am an architect in Seattle. And this is the story of what I said to my mother 2 years after my wedding, and what happened between us, and what I understand now about the difference between being loved and being understood. I want to say something about my mother, and about who she is, and about the specific quality of the relationship between us that makes the makeup room statement and the wedding toast simultaneously true, and that makes the 2-year timeline necessary rather than avoidant. My mother's name is Diane. She is 63 years old. She is a retired kindergarten teacher who was, by all accounts of the parents of her students, an extraordinary kindergarten teacher. Patient, specific, genuinely delighted by the particular ways that 5-year-olds experience the world. She had done this work for 28 years. She had also been my mother, and the specific way she had been my mother was not always the specific way she had been a kindergarten teacher. The patience she had brought to other people's children had not always been available for me, which is not an indictment of her. Parents with extraordinary professional patience often discover that the patience is not a limitless resource, and that the people they are closest to receive what is left after the professional demand, but which had been the condition of my childhood in a way I had spent many years understanding. She loved me. This is the part I want to say clearly. She loved me and loves me genuinely and specifically. She had also found me genuinely difficult to understand. Both of those things were true. The makeup room statement had been the most concentrated expression of the second truth in a moment that had required the first truth to be the only visible thing. She had said the second truth in the makeup room and the first truth at the toast. I had heard both. I had needed to address the second. I had done her hair the morning of my wedding. I want to return to this for a moment because it is the piece of a story that has stayed with me most persistently in the years since. I had done her hair because she had asked me to. She had said, in the months before the wedding, "I want you to do my hair." She had said, "I don't trust anyone else with it." She had said this without understanding what it revealed. It revealed that in the domain of her hair she trusted me more than she trusted anyone else, and that this trust had been built by years of my doing her hair with the specific care and attention that her hair required. I had done her hair for special occasions since I was 17 years old. I had learned what her hair needed from years of paying attention to what her hair was like and what it responded to and what it required. This is exactly the kind of specific knowledge that I build in my professional work, the knowledge of a particular person's particular space and what it needs. I had known her hair the way I know the spaces I design, specifically and practically and from sustained attention. She had trusted my knowledge of her hair. She had not trusted my knowledge of myself. These two things had coexisted for 20 years without either of them changing the other. The morning of my wedding, I had sat with her for an hour and had done her hair with the full specific care it required, and she had thanked me and had left the room, and 45 minutes later she had told the makeup room that I had always needed too much. I want to say something about the specific design process that had given me the most clarifying framework for what I was working toward in the 2 years between the wedding and the conversation, and about what the professional habit of thinking about need versus stated want had contributed. In architecture, when we begin a residential project, the first thing we do is a program document, an accounting of what the client needs the building to do, not in terms of specific rooms and square footage, but in terms of the life the building is supposed to make possible. How does the family want to move through the space? What is the relationship between private and shared? What does morning look like, and what does evening look like, and what does a Saturday look like? The program document is built through a series of conversations that are designed to move the client from what they think they want to what they actually need. The conversations are structured to reveal the actual need because the actual need is what the design has to serve. I had been doing this work for 8 years. I had decided, in the second year after the wedding, to apply the process to my relationship with my mother, to stop trying to address the stated want, her need to be recognized as the parent of a difficult child, and to start trying to understand the actual need underneath it. What did the stated want reveal? What was the actual need that was producing the statement, "I had always needed too much"? I had spent a year working on this question before I had the conversation. The answer I had arrived at had been, she needed to have been seen as a good mother of a child who was hard to parent. The difficulty had been real. Her effort had been real. And neither the effort nor the difficulty had been adequately witnessed. I had been too busy surviving the designation to witness the effort. She had been too busy managing the difficulty to be witnessed in the effort. We had both been in the wrong room. I called my mother in December of the second year. I had called rather than visiting because the call gave each of us the specific freedom of not having to manage our faces. I had said, "I want to talk about the wedding." She had been quiet in the specific way she is quiet when she is deciding whether to move toward or away from a difficult subject. She had said, "Okay." She had said it in the tone of someone who has been waiting for the call without knowing they were waiting. I had said, "I heard what you said to the makeup room." She had been very quiet. I had said, "Rosario told me." She had been very quiet again. She had said, "Selene." She had said my name in the tone that means she is about to say something that she is not certain she can say. I had said, "I am not calling to make you feel bad about it. I am calling because I have been thinking about it for 2 years, and I need to say some things, and I need to hear some things." She had said, "Okay." I had said, "Okay." I had taken a breath. I had said the things. I want to say something about what I had said in the December call, and about what I had needed to say, and what I had chosen not to say, and about why the choosing of what not to say had been as important as the choosing of what to say. I had said, "I heard you tell those women that I had always needed too much." I had said, "I want you to know that I have been hearing a version of this for most of my life, and that I have been carrying the designation of difficult for as long as I can remember." I had said, "I don't think you meant it as a permanent statement about who I am." I had said, "I think you were tired, in a way you have always been tired, and you were talking to the women who were doing your makeup, and you said the thing that was most present for you at that moment." She had been very quiet. She had said, "Yes, that is what happened." She had said, "I am sorry you heard it." I had said, "I know you are." I then said the thing I had been preparing for 2 years to say. I said, "I want to tell you something about what my experience of being your daughter has been." She had been very quiet. She had said, "Tell me." I had not said everything. I had not said the full accounting of the years of being designated difficult and what it had cost. I had said the essential thing. I had said that I had spent my childhood trying to be a version of myself that would be easier for her to understand, and that the trying had not succeeded, and that I had spent my adulthood learning that the version of me that was easier for her to understand was not the actual version of me, and that I had needed to stop trying to be the easier version, and that the stopping had been the most important thing I had ever done. I had said, "I am not difficult. I am myself." She had been very quiet for a long time. Then she had said, "I know." She had said, "I know." I had been quiet. She had said, "I think I have always known that the difficulty was—" She had stopped. She had started again. She had said, "I think the difficulty was mine." She had said, I think I didn't know how to. She had stopped again. She had said, "You were more yourself than I knew how to handle." I had sat with this for a moment. She had said, "I thought something was wrong with you for a long time." She had said, "I don't think that now." She had said, "I think I didn't know how to be the mother of a person who was as fully themselves as you were." I had said, "I know that." She had said, "I should have said it before. Not at the makeup room. To you." I had said, "Yes." She had said, "I'm sorry it took me so long." She had said it with the specific weight of a person who is saying a true thing that has been true for a long time and that is finally being said in the right direction. I had said, "I know." I had said, "I believe you." She had said, "Does that help?" I had said, "Yes. It helps a lot." I want to say something about the specific phrase she had used, "You were more yourself than I knew how to handle," and about why that phrase had been the thing that had landed most completely in the December call, and about what I had done with it in the months since. She had not said, "You were too much." She had not said, "You were difficult." She had said, "You were more yourself than I knew how to handle." This is a statement organized around her capacity rather than around my character. The previous statements had been organized around my character. I needed too much. I was difficult. I had always been a challenge. Those statements located the problem in me. The December statement located it in the gap between who I was and what she was equipped to handle. The gap had been real. My mother had been real. I had been real. The problem had been the fit rather than either of us. This reframing had not been a small thing. It had reorganized my understanding of the designation that I had been carrying for 20 years. I had been carrying it as a fact about my character. The December call had revealed it as a fact about a specific relationship between a specific parent and a specific child who had been more herself than the parent had known how to handle. I had not been too much. I had been exactly myself. The exactly myself had been more than one person's handling capacity. Both of those things were true. Neither of them was a problem with me. I want to say something about the architectural framework and about what it had given me for understanding what my mother had done at the makeup room and at the toast, and what the 2-year process had been working toward. In architecture, when a design is not working, there are 2 possible diagnoses. The design is wrong for the site, or the design is wrong for the program. A design that is wrong for the site has the right program, the right rooms, the right relationships, the right size, but it has been placed on a piece of land that cannot support what the design requires. A design that is wrong for the program has been placed correctly on the land but serves the wrong needs. It is beautiful and well-built, but it does not make the life the client was trying to live possible. My mother's understanding of me had been wrong for the program. She had been observing me accurately. I was indeed intense and specific and full of feeling and clear about what I needed, and she had been interpreting what she observed through a program that did not match what was actually there. Her program said, "This is a difficult child." The actual program said, "This is a child who is fully herself." The observations had been the same. The program had been wrong. The December call had been the revision of the program. The revised program said, "She was more herself than I knew how to handle." The revised program was more accurate. A more accurate program produces a more accurate design. The design of the relationship had needed the more accurate program all along. I want to say something about Rosario and about what she had given me by telling me what she had heard and about what I had understood in the years since, about why the telling had been the right call and what it had cost her to make it. Rosario has been my closest friend since college. She had been my maid of honor because she was the person who had witnessed the most of my life and who had the best understanding of the full picture of who I was and what my relationship with my mother had been. She had heard the makeup room statement. She had made a calculation. The ceremony was in 30 minutes, and the information she had was significant and potentially destabilizing, and she had to decide whether to share it before the ceremony or after. She had decided to share it before. I have thought about this decision many times. She had been right, but the rightness is not self-evident. There is an argument that the correct thing to do is to protect the person getting married from difficult information until after the wedding is over. Rosario had not made that argument to herself. She had made the argument that I would want to know, that I had a right to know, and that knowing before the ceremony would be better than knowing after, because knowing before the ceremony would give me a chance to integrate the information into the event rather than discovering the information after the event had concluded in a way that would retroactively change the meaning of it. She had been right about this. I had needed to know. the garden, the 30 minutes, the composure I had brought to the ceremony, these had all been the product of having had the information in time to do something with it. What I had done with it was decide to get married anyway, which was the right decision, and to be composed, which was possible only because the information had arrived in time to be integrated rather than arriving as a disruption afterward. Rosario had given me that. The telling had been her gift. My mother and I had dinner together in March, 3 months after the December call. She had come to Seattle from Portland, where she lives. My parents had moved to Portland after her retirement, to be near my sister, and we had gone to a restaurant that I had chosen for the specific reason that it was not a restaurant with family associations. I had wanted a neutral space. She had arrived looking slightly formal, the way she looks when she is treating an occasion as something that needs to be treated carefully. I had been glad to see her. Both things had been true simultaneously. I had been genuinely glad to see her, and I had also been treating the occasion as something that needed to be treated carefully. We had ordered and we had talked about the ordinary things first. Her retirement, the garden she had been building, my work, Jonas. At some point in the second hour she had said, "I have been thinking about what you said in December." I had said, "Tell me." She had said, "I have been thinking about the morning of the wedding." She had said, "You did my hair." I had said, "Yes." She had said, "I should have known, when I was in the makeup room, that the person who had just spent an hour with my hair was not the person I was describing." She had said, "I forgot you in the description." I had said, "Yes." She had said, "That is what I regret most." She had said, "I forgot you." I had said, "I know." She had said, "I don't want to forget you again." I had said, "I know you don't." I had said, "I am going to keep telling you who I am." She had said, "And I am going to keep listening." We had ordered dessert. The March evening had continued. I want to say something about the month after the March dinner, and about a specific conversation I had had with Jonas about what had shifted between my mother and me, and about what he had observed that I had not been able to see from inside the shifting. Jonas had said, on a Saturday morning in April, "I want to tell you something I noticed at the March dinner." He had said, "Your mother looked at you differently." I had said, "How do you mean?" He had said, "She was watching you. Not watching you the way someone watches a person they find difficult to read. Watching you the way someone watches a person they are trying to learn." He had said, "There was a specific moment when you were describing the project you were working on, the Hillcrest house, and she had this expression that I can only describe as, 'I didn't know she was like this.'" I had said, "Like what?" He had said, "Like you are. Clear and specific and invested in the thing you are describing." He had said, "I think she was meeting you for the first time." I had sat with this for a long time. She had been meeting me for the first time, at a dinner in Seattle in March, 34 years after I had been born and 22 years after she had first told me I was too much. The meeting had required the December call. The December call had required 2 years of preparation. The 2 years of preparation had been possible because of 30 minutes in a garden with Rosario. And the whole sequence had produced a dinner in March where my mother had looked at me for the first time with the expression of a person who was trying to learn rather than a person who had already decided what was there. He had noticed it. He had told me. The noticing had been Jonas's gift. I want to say something about the Hillcrest house, and about what the project had been, and about why describing it to my mother at the March dinner had produced the expression Jonas had described. The Hillcrest house was the project I had been working on for 8 months at the time of the dinner. It was for a family of 4 who had come to me with a stated want that had taken 3 months of conversation to resolve into an actual need. The stated want had been, "We want more space." The actual need, unpacked across many conversations, had been, "We want to stop feeling like we are on top of each other." The family had not needed more square footage. They had needed the existing square footage to be organized differently. The privacy zones needed to be genuinely private, and the shared zones needed to be genuinely shared, and the transitions between them needed to be clear and deliberate rather than accidental and porous. The redesign had been an exercise in making the existing space serve the actual life rather than adding more space to an organization that was not serving the life they were living. The project had been interesting to me because the most elegant solutions in architecture are usually the ones that work with what is already there rather than adding to it. The relationship between my mother and me was also an exercise in making what was already there serve the actual life. We had not needed to add anything. We had needed to reorganize what existed. The love that was genuinely present, the history that was genuinely shared, the specific knowledge each of us had of the other. The December call had been the redesign. The March dinner had been the first evening in the redesign space. I want to say something about what this year, the year of the December call and the March dinner and the April Saturday, had given me in terms of understanding about what the designation difficult had done to the years before it was revised and about what the revision had produced. The designation difficult, carried for 20 years, had done a specific thing. It had made me into the interpreter of my own experience through a frame that was not accurate. If you are told for 20 years that you need too much, you begin to organize your interior life around the question of whether what you need is too much. You begin to edit yourself. You begin to manage what you want and what you show and what you ask for, not necessarily because you are afraid of rejection, but because the designation has entered the way you understand yourself and has produced a specific self-monitoring that is the practical expression of the designation. I had been self-monitoring in exactly this way for 20 years. Not in all domains. In my work I had been fully myself, had been demanding and specific and clear, and had built a practice around those qualities, but in the domain of my relationship with my mother I had been the edited version of myself rather than the actual version. The December call had been the first time I had shown her the actual version. The clear statement of what my experience had been, the specific naming of the designation and its cost, the sentence I am not difficult. I am myself. She had heard it. She had said, I know. She had said, you were more yourself than I knew how to handle. The editing had been based on a wrong program. The right program did not require the editing. I had stopped editing. The March dinner had been me, unedited, in the first full expression of the stopped editing. She had watched me describe the Hillcrest house with the expression of a person meeting someone for the first time. We were meeting. It was the right time to meet. 34 years is a long time. It was the right time. In June, my mother had come to Seattle again, this time without an occasion. She had called in May and had said, "Can I come in June?" I had said yes. She had come for a long weekend. We had gone to a farmer's market on Saturday morning and had walked along the waterfront, and she had looked at the buildings the way I look at buildings. Not at the facades, but at the corners, at the transitions, at the way the buildings met the street, and the way the light moved through them. She had never talked about buildings with me before. She had said, looking at a building on Western Avenue, "That window is wrong." I had said yes. I had said, "What makes you say that?" She had said, "It's not looking at anything." I had said yes. "The window doesn't relate to the street below it." She had said, "It's looking at nothing." I had said yes. She had said, "That seems like a mistake someone made that nobody caught." I had said, "Or a decision that seemed right in the drawings and was wrong when it was built." She had said, "Do you catch those?" I had said, "I try." She had said, "What happens when you don't?" I had said, "You build a window that looks at nothing." She had laughed. I had laughed. We had walked along the waterfront on a June morning in Seattle, looking at the buildings, talking about windows. She had been learning to see what I saw. I had been learning that she could learn. I want to say something about the hair, and about what doing my mother's hair for the wedding had meant, and what it means now in the context of everything that followed. She had trusted my hands with her hair for 17 years, before the wedding. She had not trusted my understanding of myself. This gap had been the specific gap of the relationship. She had known my capacity and my precision, and my specific knowledge of the things I turned my attention to. She had not known how to receive me as a full person with a full interior life that was as specific and as reliable and as worth trusting as my hands. The December call had been me asking her to extend to my interior the same trust she had extended to my hands. She had been learning to do this since December. The June walk along the waterfront, when she had looked at the window and said, "It's looking at nothing," that had been her extending the trust. She had been looking at the building the way I look at buildings, which meant she had been looking at me the way I look at things, which meant she had been, for the first time, inside the way I see rather than observing the way I see from outside it. I had done her hair with the full, specific care it required. She had looked at a window and said it was wrong and had known why it was wrong. She was in my hands now, the way Khadija had said Fatima's mother was in her father's hands. She was in my seeing. The seeing had taken 34 years and a December call and a March dinner and a June Saturday on the waterfront to arrive. The arriving was the thing. The window was not looking at nothing anymore. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story landed close to something real in your life, write it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you have been carrying a designation that was not accurate, I want to say something clearly before you go. The designation is an interpretation. It is not a fact. It is an interpretation made by a specific person with a specific capacity at a specific moment. The interpretation can be revised. The revision requires the conversation. The conversation requires you to say the thing that has been true for a long time to the person who is ready to hear it. The person who designated you was not wrong about the difficulty. They were wrong about where the difficulty was. The difficulty was in the gap between who you were and what they knew how to handle. You were not too much. You were exactly yourself. The gap is not your fault. The gap can be closed by the right conversation at the right time. The right time comes. The December call comes. The March dinner comes. The June morning on the waterfront comes. The window that was looking at nothing looks at you and says, I see you now. That is enough. Let it be enough. I want to say something about the specific moment in the garden with Rosario, and about what the 30 minutes had contained, and about what had happened in me during them. She had found me near the garden wall, in the specific corner where I had gone to be briefly alone, which is something I do at large social occasions. I find a corner and stand in it for a few minutes before returning to the room. She had come around the corner looking for me, with the careful face of someone about to deliver information they have considered and considered again, and decided is necessary. She had told me. I had received it. I had put it in the specific place in myself, where things go when they cannot be addressed immediately. I have been putting things in this place my whole life. The capacity to hold difficult information without letting it reorganize my behavior in the moment is one of the things I do best, and one of the things that had probably contributed to my mother's sense that I was difficult to read. A person who puts things in the holding place is a person who can appear composed when they are carrying something. I had appeared composed throughout my childhood in ways that my mother had sometimes experienced as withholding. I had not shown her the difficulty she was producing because I had been holding it. She had not known I was holding it. She had not known there was a place. In the garden, I had told Rosario, I have had a lot of practice. This had been the truest thing I had said all day. I had been practicing the holding for 20 years. The 30 minutes had been another practice. I had gotten married. I had held it. I had put it in the place. 2 years later I had taken it out of the place and had called my mother with it. That is the arc of a story. The holding place is not forever. It is for until you are ready. I want to say something about what my sister Elena had said when I had told her about the makeup room statement, and about why her response had been the most clarifying response I had received from any family member. Elena is 4 years younger than I am, and has a relationship with our mother that is, by my observation in her account, genuinely different from mine. Warmer in the day-to-day, less fraught in the specific ways that had produced the makeup room statement, organized around a different set of assumptions that have produced a different dynamic. When I had told Elena about the makeup room statement, 3 months after the wedding, she had been quiet for a long time. She had then said something that had surprised me. She had said, I have heard versions of this my whole life. I had said, about me. She had said, about the work of you. She had said, Mom talks about raising you the way someone talks about climbing something very difficult. She had said, I used to think it meant you were difficult. She had said, I think now it means she didn't know how to receive you. I had said yes. She had said, I have always known how to receive you. I had said yes. You have. She had said, I think she knows how to love you. I don't think she always knows how to be with you. I had said, what's the difference? She had said, loving is something you feel. Being with someone is something you do. She had said, Mom feels it. She doesn't always know how to do it. I had held this for a long time. It had been the most precise thing anyone had said about the dynamic, and it had come from my sister, who had been in the same household and had seen both sides and had arrived at the accurate distinction. Elena had always known how to receive me. She had named the thing my mother had not known how to do. I want to say something about the wedding itself, and about what had happened between my mother and me during the ceremony and at the reception, and about what had been present between us that neither of us had named. The ceremony had been beautiful in the specific way that ceremonies are beautiful when the people in them are genuinely present. The words had been chosen carefully, and Jonas and I had written the vows ourselves, and the vows had been specific to who we were rather than generic to the occasion. My mother had been in the front row on the left. I had seen her during the ceremony in the way that you see the people you love best when something important is happening, peripherally but completely. She had been crying during the vows, which she had not expected to cry during because she is not a person who cries easily, and the crying had had the quality of something genuine rather than performed. She had loved me. This had been visible in the front row. She had also, 45 minutes before, told 4 women that I had always needed too much. The love and the statement had coexisted for the full duration of my wedding day. This is the thing I had understood most clearly in the 2 years that had followed. The love had been real and the statement had been real, and neither one canceled the other. The difficulty in the relationship had not been the absence of love. It had been the presence of love in a relationship where the understanding had been incomplete. The love without the understanding produces a specific kind of loneliness, the loneliness of being loved by someone who does not quite see you. I had been that kind of lonely for 20 years. The December call had begun the process of making the love and the understanding occupy the same space. I want to say something about the program document process in architecture and about the specific conversations that had taught me the most about how to listen for the actual need behind the stated want and about why I had been doing a version of this in my family long before I had done it professionally. The program document process begins with a question that seems simple and is not. What do you want this building to do? Most clients answer with rooms and features. I want an open kitchen, I want a master bedroom on the main floor, I want a mudroom. These are valid answers, but they are not answers to the question. The question is, what do you want the building to do? Not what do you want in the building, but what do you want the building to produce in the life of the people who inhabit it? Getting from the first kind of answer to the second requires a specific patience and a specific set of follow-up questions. Why do you want the open kitchen? What happens in your life now that the open kitchen would change? What do you imagine happening differently? The follow-up questions move the conversation from the feature to the function, from the stated want to the actual need. I had been asking these questions about my mother's behavior since I was old enough to observe that her behavior was specific and consistent in a way that had a meaning underneath it. I had been asking, why does she say I need too much? What is she trying to communicate? What is she actually describing? The December call had been the culmination of 20 years of following up on those questions until I had arrived at an answer I could bring to her directly. She had been saying I needed too much because my fullness had exceeded what she had known how to hold, and the excess had been experienced by her as the difficulty rather than as the fullness. I had been listening for the actual need for 20 years. In December, I had finally presented the findings. I want to say something about Jonas and about what he had given me during the 2 years between the wedding and the December call, and about what he had understood about the situation that had been most useful. Jonas is an emergency room physician. He is constitutionally oriented toward triage, the rapid assessment of a situation, the identification of what is immediately critical and what can wait, the prioritization of interventions by their urgency and their impact. He had applied this orientation to my relationship with my mother in a way that had been consistently useful. He had said, early in the 2 years, this is not an emergency. He had said, there is no injury that is getting worse in real time. He had said, you have time to think about this carefully. He had said, use the time. I had used the time. I had also, at several points in the 2 years, wanted to make the call before I was ready, and he had said, not yet. He had said it without telling me when. He had said it in the way of a person who knows that readiness is not a schedule but a condition, and that the condition arrives when it arrives. In December he had said, you are ready. I had said, how do you know? He had said, you know what you need to say and you know why and you know what you need to hear and you know how to hold both. He had said, that is ready. He had been right. The December call had gone the way it had gone because I had been ready in the specific way he had described. I had known what I needed to say. I had known why, I had known what I needed to hear, and I had known how to hold both at once. His emergency medicine framework had kept me from making the call before the readiness was there. The readiness had produced the December call. The December call had produced the March dinner. The March dinner had produced the June waterfront. The readiness had been worth waiting for. I want to say something about what the 2 years of preparation had looked like in practice, and about the specific things I had done to arrive at the December call in the state Jonas had described as ready. I had talked to my therapist, whom I had been seeing for 3 years. I had talked to Rosario, who had known the full picture since the garden. I had talked to Elena, who had named the distinction between loving and being with someone. I had read, in a professional context, about how architects handle clients who present a stated want that does not match the actual need, and I had thought about the reading in the context of my mother. I had also done the specific work of writing. I had written, over the 2 years, several drafts of what I wanted to say in the December call, not as a script but as a way of working out what the true thing was and what form it needed to take. Each draft had been different from the previous one. The early drafts had been organized around grievance. Here is what you did, here is what it cost me. The later drafts had been organized around the actual need. Here is what I have been carrying, here is what I need you to understand, here is what I need you to hear me say. The shift from the grievance structure to the need structure had taken approximately 18 months. The December call had been organized around the need structure. The need structure had produced I am not difficult. I am myself, and she had responded, I know. You were more yourself than I knew how to handle. The grievance structure would have produced a different call. The 18 months had been the work of arriving at the structure that produced the December call, rather than the call that the grievance structure would have produced. I want to say something about the Hillcrest house, and about what it had looked like by the time I had described it at the March dinner, and about what describing it to my mother had given me that I had not had before. The Hillcrest house had been in its design development phase in March, past the programming and schematic design phases, into the specific work of turning the program and the concept into actual drawings that would become an actual house. The family had approved the schematic design in February. The design had been the organization of privacy and shared space that the program had identified as the actual need. The bedrooms in a private wing that was genuinely separated from the shared areas, the kitchen, and living space organized to allow the family to be together while each person maintained some degree of individual activity, the transitions between private and shared design with care so that moving between them was deliberate rather than accidental. The design had been, I thought, one of the clearest expressions of the program I had produced. You could look at the plan and see the life it was designed to make possible. I had described this to my mother at the March dinner not as a technical achievement, but as a story. Here is the family, here is what they needed, here is what the space is now designed to give them. She had listened in the specific way I had not seen her listen before, not waiting for her turn to speak, not processing what I was saying in relation to herself, but following the story. When I had finished, she had said, You gave them their life back. She had said it simply. I had said, yes, that is the work. She had said, I can see that you are good at it. Not, I'm glad you have a career. I can see that you are good at it. She had been looking at what I did. She had been seeing it. I want to say something about the specific quality of self-monitoring that the difficult designation had produced over 20 years, and about what it had done to the relationship between me and my own interior life. When you are told for long enough that what you want is too much, and what you feel is too much, and how you are is too much, you begin to apply the too much test to yourself before you present yourself to the person who made the designation. You pre-edit. You reduce. You take the full version of what you feel, or want or need, and you assess it against the too much standard before you express it. If it fails the standard, you do not express it. This is not dishonesty. It is self-protection. The self-protection is rational under the conditions that have produced the designation, because expressing the full version has historically produced the experience of being told that the full version is too much. So you reduce. You give the reduced version. The reduced version is easier for the other person. The reduced version is also not you. It is the edited you. The relationship that is built on the edited version is not a relationship with you. It is a relationship with the edited version. My mother had been in a relationship with the edited version for 20 years. The December call had been the presentation of the full version. She had heard the full version and had said, I know. She had said, You were more yourself than I knew how to handle. She had been hearing the full version for the first time in the place it had always belonged, directly from me to her. The editing was over. The full version was available. The relationship was now between two actual people. I want to say something about a conversation I had had with my father in January, a month after the December call with my mother, about what he had said when I told him about the call. My father and my mother have been married for 40 years. He had been present for the full 20 years of my relationship with my mother and had known the specific texture of the dynamic from the inside. He had not always known how to address it. He had sometimes been the person who had smoothed things over, who had stood between me and my mother's difficulty with me and had absorbed what he could. When I had told him about the December call, he had been quiet for a long time. He had said, "I should have said this to her a long time ago." I had said, "You couldn't have." He had said, "Why not?" I had said, "Because she couldn't have heard it from you in the same way she heard it from me." He had said, "What do you mean?" I had said, "When I say it, I am the one who carried it. When you say it, you are repeating something I told you. The authority is different." He had been quiet. He had said, "Yes, that's true." He had said, "I'm glad you said it." I had said, "Me too." He had said, "She is not what you think she is." I had said, "I know." He had said, "She thought about you constantly. She thought about how to reach you. She didn't always succeed." I had said, "I know she thought about me." I had said, "Thinking about me is not the same as reaching me." He had said, "No, it's not." He had said it simply, as someone acknowledging the accurate statement rather than defending the partial one. He had been in the middle for 40 years. He had known the gap. He had not known how to close it. The December call had closed something. He had felt the closing from the middle. I want to say something about the specific project I was working on at the time of the December call, and about why the project had been in the background of my thinking throughout the preparation, and about what the project had clarified about what I was doing with my mother. The project had been a renovation of a house that had been built in 1960, and that had, over 60 years, been altered and added to and modified in ways that had addressed individual needs at individual moments without any of the alterations ever being organized around a coherent understanding of what the house was supposed to be. The result had been a house that worked in specific ways for specific functions and failed in other ways in a pattern that was hard to diagnose because no single change had been wrong on its own terms. The problem had been cumulative. Many individually sensible changes had produced, in aggregate, a house that was incoherent. My work on the renovation had been the work of stepping back from the individual changes and asking, what is this house supposed to be? What is the life it is supposed to make possible? Once I had answered those questions, the individual decisions about what to keep and what to change, and what to add had followed from a coherent organizing principle. The renovation had been, in essence, the discovery of the house was always trying to be, and the work of removing the accumulations that had been preventing it from being that. I had been thinking about this project during the preparation for the December call because the relationship with my mother had the same structure. 20 years of individually sensible adjustments and adaptations, made in response to specific moments that had accumulated into a dynamic that was incoherent as a whole. The December call had been the stepping back. What is this relationship supposed to be? What life is it supposed to make possible? Once I had answered those questions, the December call had followed from a coherent organizing principle. We are supposed to be in a relationship where she sees me fully, and I am not required to edit myself for her comfort. That was the house was always trying to be. The December call had removed an accumulation that had been preventing it from being that. I want to say something about what had happened at my studio in the week after the June waterfront walk, and about a specific interaction with a client that had made me understand something about what the June walk had been. I was meeting with a new client, a couple who were beginning the programming phase of a kitchen renovation. The woman of the couple had been describing what she wanted in the kitchen and had been using the language of features: more counter space, better storage, a bigger window. I had been listening in the way I always listen, tracking the features and simultaneously listening for the actual need beneath the features. She had said, "Finally, I just want to feel less frantic when I cook." I had said, "Tell me about the frantic." She had described her kitchen. The way the counter space was in the wrong place relative to the stove, the way she had to turn constantly, the way the kitchen did not let her be efficient in the way cooking required her to be. I had said, "I think I understand what you need." I had said, "I want to show you something." I had sketched a simple reorganization of the kitchen's functional zones. She had looked at the sketch. She had said, "Yes." She had said, "That's it." She had not said, "That's what I wanted." She had said, "That's it." There is a specific quality to the recognition of the actual need when it is reflected back accurately. It is not the satisfaction of a stated want, it is the recognition of a true thing. My mother had had that quality in June when she had stood at the window on Western Avenue and had said, "That window is looking at nothing." She had been seeing something true. She had been in my seeing. That's it,